Shalom. We haven't talked enough about one of the greatest Mukubalim of Tzfat, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz. We've talked about Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Mabit, others. They have biographies, but Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz doesn't have a full biography. You don't know enough about him. It's about time someone wrote a whole biography on this very interesting person, Alav Shlomo Elkabetz. But first I'd like to start out with something that connects us to this time of year, to the Parshat Shavua. Today is Tu B'Av, the happiest day of the year. And we read Parshat Ve'etchanan this last Shabbat. And in Parshat Ve'etchanan, we read for the second time Aseret HaDibrot. And we all know that there are a few differences between the Aseret HaDibrot of Ve'etchanan and the original ones in Parshat Yitro. And maybe the most famous example is that in Ve'etchanan, we read Shamor et HaShabbat Lekadsho. Not Zachor, like it says in Parshat Yitro, but Shamor. And then immediately, we all remembered the Lecha Dodi of Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz. When the first stanza is Shamor veZachor b'dibur echad, Yishmi'anu ela miyuchad, Hashem echad u'shmo echad, Hashem hu tiferet v'litila. Shamor veZachor b'dibur echad. It was said in one saying by Kadosh Baruch Hu, Shamor veZachor. We would expect, though, that Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, who of course wrote the Lecha Dodi here in Tzfat, and we don't have the time to dissect the Lecha Dodi, which we need hours for to dissect the Lecha Dodi. We would expect him to write Zachor v'Shamor b'dibur echad. Zachor starts out as it says in the Parshat Yitro, first Zachor, and then Shamor in Ve'etchanan, when Moshe repeats the Aseret HaDibrot. So most people think and say Shamor veZachor because of the Shin of Shamor, which is the first letter of Shlomo Halevi, the acrosticon of the Lecha Dodi. Shlomo, Halevi, who wrote the Lecha Dodi, his first letter is Shin, so that's why he started out with Shamor veZachor. But no, it's probably not that. As we learned from this book, the best book that's written on the Lecha Dodi, a whole book written, not a biography of Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz that we still need, but a whole book on the Lecha Dodi, its inner meaning, written by Professor Reuven Kimmelman. It's written in Hebrew and came out from Hebrew University a while ago. And he tells us that there are other reasons why it says Shamor veZachor and not Zachor veShamor. Let me just maybe quote and explain just one of the sentences in Hebrew. Sikumo shel davar, Shamor mesamen laila. Shamor is the nighttime. Kala, it symbolizes the Kala, the bride. Hashchina, the holy presence. Hashchina is the bottom and upper line of Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz all the time. Hashchina. Malchut, kingdom. Ve'hahei, and the Hey in the Shema Havaya, in the Yud Ke Vav Ke. But Zachor is the daytime, so it should be after. Zachor mesamen yom. Chatan, the groom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Tiferet Yesod of the Sfirot. Ve'havav B'Shem Ha'avaya, and the Vav in the Shem of Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke. And I suggest this is the book if you want to really understand the inner meaning of the Lecha Dodi and what Elkabetz meant in this very famous poem. You know, he wasn't really so much a poet. He was a great Talmid Chacham, but he's the one that wrote this very famous poem, Lecha Dodi, here in Tzfat. And we talked about where I think he wrote it, probably atop of Tzfat on the Mitzudah, where you could see from there, a vantage point where you could look for the Shekhinah. So that's one thing I want to start out with, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, who wrote the Lecha Dodi here in Tzfat, but he lived for a lot of years outside of Tzfat. He only came to Tzfat in his 30s. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz was probably born around 1500, most probably in Saloniki, from a Spanish Sephardi family who was exiled from Spain in 1492. His grandfather was a printer in Spain. His father was a Dayan in Saloniki, Moshe. His grandfather is Shlomo, and so he's named after his grandfather. By the way, the name Elkabetz reminds us, of course, Kibbutz Galuyot, a gathering of the exiles. Elkabetz, and we have the Elkabetz family in Israel. We even have Elkabetz members here in Tzfat today. A number of them are with us here in Tzfat. So Elkabetz in Hebrew, a beautiful name, Kibbutz Galuyot. But it could be that originally maybe the name was El Capso in Cabaso in Spanish, meaning head, or the head of a family, or the head of a community. And so the roots are from Spain, like most of the other great rabbis in Saloniki and in Tzfat. He was born about 1500. That means he was about 12 years younger than his chevruta, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who he met in Saloniki, and they learned together in Saloniki, and they probably had the Tikkun Leil Shavuot in 1534 in Saloniki, although some say in Nikopol in Bulgaria. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz gets married at the age of 29 or so, 1529, and in these years when he's in Saloniki and in Adrianopol and Adirna, okay, and in the area of northern Spain and western Turkey today, he wrote a number of books, Perushim, Brit HaLevi. He wrote a midrash on Haggadah of Pesach, Kabbalah. Manot HaLevi. He wrote first Manot HaLevi, which is a perush on Megillat Esther, and he gave this Manot HaLevi as a present to his bride's family. The Kohen family, Rabbi Yitzchak Kohen. Rabbi Yitzchak Kohen was a well-to-do person, an important part of the Jewish community in Saloniki, and he married his wife. We don't know the names of the wives, at least I don't know. Many of the wives and many of the ladies and the women, we don't know their names. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz's daughter was also well known afterward in Tzfat. We don't know her name. Sometimes we find the women's names on the tombstones if they're discovered in the cemetery. Okay, like the sister of Rabbi Chaim Vital, I mentioned already, who was called, her name was Reine. We know that from her tomb, from a tombstone in the cemetery. And so Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz grew up in Tzfat. He had at least two rabbis. Okay, one, the very famous, the very important Rabbi Taitachik, the Rosh Yeshiva of Saloniki. He learned in his yeshiva, but he also mentions another rabbi, Rabbi Moshe El Bilada, who was probably his teacher in his younger age until he was about 10, 11 years old. He mentions him in a drasha, okay, a sermon that he gave in Saloniki, a farewell sermon before he left Saloniki to go up to Eretz Israel, okay, going first to Rabbi Yosef Karo and then coming up to Eretz Israel, okay, in the 1530s. And we have his farewell sermon given on Parshat Vayakel. He talks about the Mishkan, and he talks about the Mishkan, then he mentions the Beit HaMikdash that isn't here anymore. okay? The Chalev, it's in ruin. And he says we have to go to Eretz Israel for redemption, to build the Beit HaMikdash. And he did. Okay? Many prayed in Chutz La'aretz all the time for redemption, but he felt that he has to go to Eretz Israel for the redemption, for the Geula. For him, the themes of exile and redemption were the main themes throughout his life. And in Saloniki, he even wrote a kina, a lamentation. Although he was born in 1500, 8 years after the expulsion, but he lived and talked to the people who still remembered Spain, and it shook him very hard, and he wrote a whole kina, a whole lamentation on the exile and giving hope for Geula, for redemption, and trying to explain the hardships of the Anusim, the conversos, and thinking how to help them out all the time. So Shlomo Elkabetz has a whole part of his life, as younger years, writing perushim, writing books, and even lamentations, poem. Yes, he was a poet, but he didn't write hundreds of poems, like Shabazi of Teiman. Okay? He was a big Talmid Chacham. He also wrote Ayelet Ahavim. He wrote Perush for Shir HaShirim. So he has a whole list of books and Perushim that he wrote, and things that he wrote also that were never printed, and things that I think we got lost. So Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz was already an important Mekubal. He was an important Kabbalist already in Saloniki before he came up to Eretz Israel in his late 30s. Rabbi Yosef Karo was already 47 when they both came up to Eretz Israel. I wanted also to mention that important things happened to Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz before he came up to Eretz Israel, things that influenced him greatly. Even afterward, when he wrote the Lecha Dodi here in Tzfat, it wasn't that he all of a sudden woke up. We had years of contemplation in Saloniki. I already mentioned one of the most important people he and Rabbi Yosef Karo met was Shlomo Molcho. We talked about him, I think, last time. And Shlomo Molcho, also a Kabbalist, who felt that the Mashiach is coming now, and we have to do things now to even push away the enemy. For them, the enemy was even the Ottoman Empire, and they even went to the Pope, Shlomo Molcho, David Haruveni, and in the end, Shlomo Molcho was burnt at the stake, and that influenced greatly Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz. So that's one thing, but maybe the most important event that influenced him and Rabbi Yosef Karo, I already mentioned this and we talked about this, is the Tikkun Leil Shavuot that took place maybe in Saloniki or in Nikopol, together, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz and Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Chavruta, when they were sitting and learning in the night of Shavuot, maybe 1533 in Saloniki, or maybe a year or two later, maybe in Nikopol. And there, with some others, okay, the Magid, the angel mentor, appears, not appears, he doesn't show himself, but he starts talking like a bat call from above, and the talking comes out, the sound comes out of the throat of Rabbi Yosef Karo. We know this only because Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz wrote about this later in his whole epistle that he described, where he describes this event. We also know about it from later on, from Yosef Karo in the Magid Mesharim, but the epistle is the official record we have of this very, very important event. I think this event brought about their, I don't think it, for sure this event brought about their going up to Eretz Israel, And I like to say that that year when they came to Eretz Israel, 1536, in the end it took them some time to get there, but they got her in 1536. That's the year that begins the golden age of Tzfat, when Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz comes. It's years before the Ari comes. Rabbi Yaakov Berav is in Tzfat. There are other rabbis in Tzfat, sure, but these two great people, both of them are people delving into Halacha and Kabalah. Yeah, Elkabetz, more Kabalah, but also Halacha. Rabbi Yosef Karo, maybe more Halacha, but also Kabalah. And they both go up to Tzfat, and they influence greatly what happened here. Rabbi Yosef Karo becomes the Av Beitin. They go and they both learn in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yaakov Berav. Elkabetz goes more into the Kabbalah, and he learns a lot with his brother-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero married Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz's sister. So that's how we know that the sister also came to Tzfat. We don't know so much. I'd like to know more about the family relations, and we have descendants today of Elkabetz all over the world, especially here in Israel. And so we know about his sister. I don't think we know the name. I don't know the name of the sister, but that's the wife of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the great Kabbalist, who was here in Tzfat already before. Okay? And for all I know, I think we know, scholars think that he was born in Tzfat. So maybe, we're not so sure. I'd like to see a biography of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero himself. And of course, Moshe Cordovero, of course, is from a Spanish family. But in any case, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero and Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz are brothers-in-law, and they do things together. Not only learn together, they also go out to the Kevrei Tzadikim together. And they lie down on the Kvarim. Okay? They do hishtatchut. Lishtateach means not only to visit and to say Tehillim, but also to mamash physically lie down on the tomb. To lie down with the hands and feet separated. And that's what they used to do. We have this recorded in Sefer Gerushin, written by the Ramak. Gerushin, not in terms of divorce, but the opposite, going out to the fields, to go out, to be divorced out into the fields for contemplation and for visiting the Kevrei Tzadikim, where you can contemplate and meditate and learn and become close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we have this book, Sefer Gerushin, written by the brother-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, but Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz accompanies him in this whole doing. And so Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz is here in Tzfat doing things, influencing. I like to say, I have no proof, but I have a feeling that Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, his main followers were youngsters, okay? Because he used to go out to the fields all the time. And he used to traipse up to the Mitzuda and look for the Shekhinah there. And you had to be in good physical shape to go out with him. And I think the youngsters followed him. Sure, there were the Talmidim who learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yosef Karo, Talmidim from all over the world, even from Teiman. We know of even from Teiman, from Adin, they came to learn in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yosef Karo. And there they more sat and learned Talmud and all the poskim of then, until Rabbi Yosef Karo himself finishes up the Beit Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch and the other things that he wrote. And so we have this fermentation, we have this togetherness of these great people living here together, each one doing his own thing. But it's not that each one did something by itself and he didn't know what was going on in other fields. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz was a great Talmid Chacham, besides his being a poet and a Kabbalist. And this we know from his books. We even know that his daughter, again, whose name I don't know, but his daughter was also someone who used to sit and listen to the shiurim of Rabbi Chaim Vital. She also learned Kabbalah from others. And first of all, this is interesting to know that ladies came to hear the shiurim of the great rabbis of Tzfat. And we know that she talked to other ladies about Rabbi Chaim Vital and his greatness. The daughter of Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz says to someone sitting next to her, this person, Rabbi Chaim Vital, how could he ever die? He has to live forever. And she hints that maybe he himself is the Mashiach. Rabbi Chaim Vital writes a lot about the possibility of the Mashiach in his time, hinting that maybe he himself is the Mashiach ben Yosef. But that's a story about Rabbi Chaim Vital. So that's his, a little bit about his family. I would think that Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz also had his own yeshiva. But I don't know, I can't point out today a synagogue which is named after him, the synagogue of Elkabetz, like we can point out the synagogue of the Alshech, or the two synagogues of the Ari, or the Bet HaKnesset HaGdolah, the big shul of the Abu Hav, where the Abu Hav Sefer Torah was, or the Bet Yaakov synagogue, which probably was near the Ari Sfaradi synagogue, okay, where the Mabit, where Rabbi Moshe Mitorani used to be. We talked about him also. He has a new biography, the Mabit. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz maybe went from shul to shul, and maybe he had his own yeshiva, or he just went out to the fields and he taught there. And like I've already said, in one of these outings he had, when he went up probably to the top of the Mitzudah, looking for the Shekhinah, looking for a physical Shekhinah to restart the redemption, mamash, physically, that was his longing. So that's when he had his he'ara, he had this from Hashem, Ruach Hashem, and he composed, he wrote, and maybe even composed also the lyrics, or certainly the words of the Lecha Dodi, which has a full inner meaning and a few meanings to it. He probably, when he wrote these words of the Lecha Dodi, he meant a number of things that you can understand from each of the stanzas. Okay? Not only Galut v'Geula and Shabbat and Yerushalayim. Some say that Yerushalayim is not mentioned purposely. Yerushalayim itself, you won't find the word, the name Yerushalayim inside the Lecha Dodi, but I think he refers to Yerushalayim. He's referring also to Tzfat. He's wanting for the Shekhinah to appear. That's why he looks to the Shekhinah from the Mitzudah, from the best vantage point. The Ari came around afterward. Okay? If he wrote the Lecha Dodi in the 1540s, the Ari only came 25, 30 years later. But he loved the Lecha Dodi. It was here already, and he used to sing it also. And as Rabbi Chaim Vital mentions, that the Ari decided to bring in, to welcome the Shekhinah on Kabbalat Shabbat with the Lecha Dodi, not at the top, but down where today the Ari Ashkenazi Shul is, in the Chakal Tapuchin Kadishin. That's written in Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was with the Ari in 1570, 1571, those years when the Ari was here, and he did the Kabbalat Shabbat. I'd like to say, maybe to end up in saying, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, one of the greatest Kabbalists of all time, okay? If the Ari wasn't here with us in Tzfat, would we sing the Lecha Dodi today? I hope so, I think so, but I'm not sure, because since the Ari joined in singing the Lecha Dodi and the Kabbalah Shabbat, it spread out to the world. And some people forget, some people think wrongly that it's the Ari who wrote the Lecha Dodi. But it's Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz who came up with this poem. I think maybe some people say it's the most beautiful poem we have, in at least in the liturgy, in the tefillah of Judaism. My friend Aaron Botzer likes to say that there are more than 500 rhymes for tunes to the Lecha Dodi, not only Carlebach, but all over the world, wherever Jews are, they sing the Lecha Dodi, written by Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz here in Tzfat in the 1540s. And just to end up, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz relatively had a long life. He passed away probably in 1584. And if he was born in 1500 in Saloniki, that means he lived to an age of 84, pretty ripe. In Tzfat, kacha, okay? But like the Alshech, like the Yosef Karo, the Alshech almost reached until his 80s. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz until 1584. And he continued influencing Kabbalah and Tzfat and the communities here in Tzfat during that very influential 16th century here in Tzfat. Toda.
Okay, amazing information. Thank you again, Rav Yosef. There's a story that I want to add that we know here from Tzfat of a person that lived here in Tzfat, and it's a story that happened here in Israel not too many years ago of an Arab boy that grew up in a family here in the north of Israel. And let's just say he was the youngest boy, and he wasn't treated so well by his brothers and by his father. And at a certain point, because of this relationship at home, he had to leave home, and he went down towards the center of the country, towards Ramat Gan, Bnei Brak, Petach Tikva, and he was working in a factory there. And he got closer and closer to one of his Haredi Jewish colleagues. And it ended up that this guy was invited, this Arab boy was invited for Shabbat to his colleague's house. So they go to the Beit Knesset, and they go through the Tefillah, Kabbalah Shabbat, they come to the house, they do Kiddush, they do Shalom Aleichem, they do Kiddush, and this Arab boy asks, can we sing the song again? So the Balabai thinks he's talking about Shalom Aleichem. He starts to sing Shalom Aleichem. He says, no, not that one, the one from the synagogue, from Kabbalah Shabbat, Lecha Dodi. So they sing it again, and he starts to cry, and he doesn't know. He says, the song is so powerful, I don't know what's going on with me. After a while of continuing this relationship, this Arab boy decides he wants to convert. And one time he goes to visit his family. I think these Arabs, I think they were Syrian, because as the story goes, they left their village to go celebrate a holiday, and they were coming back. So in the time that they were away, his mother stayed in Israel. He was able to go and speak with his mother without having the abuse from his father and his brothers. And he told her of what's going on in his life and how he's connected to this Jewish man and he wants to convert. And she says, you don't need to convert, you're a Jew.
Because she's Jewish.
Because I'm Jewish. I married your father and I've raised you. You never knew this, but I'm Jewish. So he now comes back to his Haredi friend in Bnei Brak and tells him, I'm a Jew. He says, listen, it's not that simple. It doesn't work like that. We have to prove it. We have to get some proof. So he goes back to his mother. His mother says, all I have is this. This is me and my parents at my great-great-grandfather's grave, and it's in Tzfat. And it's a picture of a family with her in the picture in front of a tziyun in Tzfat. So now he brings this picture back. He says, look, my mother says this is her and her parents in front of our great-great-grandfather's kever in Tzfat. So he says, do you know who it is? No, let's go to Tzfat, let's find this picture, let's match the picture. And it turns out that it was the Elkabetz's kever.
Next to the Arizal.
Right next to the Arizal. And that was his connection, that he understood that Lecha Dodi, to begin with, the song that got him so passionate that Shabbat, to begin the whole entire story, was written by his great-great-grandfather.
Mamash fantastic. It's a true story.
This is 100%.
It's not a legend.
No, this is a true
it's
story.
Not one of the Tzfat legends.
I don't know the man personally, but one of my closest friends here in Tzfat.
You don't know what village he
No, but I can get the information. One of my closest friends here in Tzfat knows this man personally, and he...
Okay, no, Yefem Mod. Look, I said there are descendants of of Elkabetz all over Israel. I didn't mean that, but
no.
that החידוש. יפה מאוד.
Thank you very much, Rav Yosef.
יפה מאוד.